They say a clean firing happens in a conference room, behind a closed door, with HR reading from a script like they're auditioning for a bad courtroom drama. But mine didn't happen like that. Mine happened at 4:57 p.m. on a Tuesday, in front of half the office, with my boss slamming a folder on my desk and announcing that my ongoing security lapses had put the company at risk. People froze mid-keyboard tap. Someone dropped a coffee stirrer. I just stared at him, wondering how a man who couldn't remember his own Wi-Fi password suddenly had the confidence to accuse me of breaching protocols I practically wrote. What he didn't know, was that the one thing they relied on to fire me was the same thing that was about to blow every one of them sky high, my badge. Because unlike everyone else's, mine didn't just log access. It recorded everything. It started a month earlier when IT rolled out upgraded security badges. Most employees just clipped them on and kept walking. But I was on the development team. I helped build the firmware. I knew what these badges were capable of, what they monitored, what data they fed back to the system. And I knew one thing for certain: these weren't upgrades. They were surveillance. Management wanted a digital trail of people they suspected were slacking, and my boss, Grant, had been hinting that someone on the engineering floor wasn't pulling their weight. I didn't pay much attention until I noticed him in my project files, editing timestamps, changing access records, trying to reroute blame. Grant wasn't hunting a lazy employee. He was creating one. And unfortunately for him, my badge automatically backed up every access event, including unauthorized ones, onto a separate encrypted log only I knew existed. The day he fired me, he strutted around like a man who'd finally caught the villain he'd been chasing. He announced it loudly, performatively, like he'd been waiting for an audience. "Your system violations are documented," he said, waving the folder full of his forged evidence. I didn't bother defending myself. Everyone already knew this wasn't about performance. It was about Grant needing a scapegoat for the failures he didn't want traced back to his name. But the best part? My badge had recorded him entering my workspace after hours. It had recorded him accessing my terminal without authorization. It had recorded him modifying system logs. I didn't need to argue. I just needed him to keep talking. HR walked me out of the building like I was radioactive. They even held out a tiny box for my things, as though I were going to steal my own stapler. But the moment the elevator doors closed, I pulled up my encrypted backup on my phone. Every log. Every intrusion. Every lie Grant had tried to stitch together. I forwarded everything to the compliance department, to the external audit team, and, just for fun, to the CEO's executive assistant, who had zero tolerance for Grant since he'd once called her sweetheart during a budget meeting. 2 days later, the storm hit. An investigator called me asking if I was available for a quick clarification about the badge logs I'd submitted. An hour after that, the same investigator called again, this time with a tone people reserve for bomb defusal, and said they needed every device, every credential, every piece of data I still had. I wasn't in trouble. They just realized something massive: Grant's little frame job wasn't a one-time thing. He'd been modifying access records for 6 months, covering his failures by pinning them on anyone who wouldn't fight back. Half the project delays, half the underperforming employees, half the budget misses, all him. And my badge had quietly recorded his every digital fingerprint. The company exploded internally. Executives yelling behind closed doors, security escorting people out, the audit team camped in headquarters like they were running a crime scene. Grant was suspended by noon. Fired by 5. And under formal investigation by the end of the week. Apparently, using your authority to falsify federal compliance logs is frowned upon. Who knew? A month later, the CEO personally called me, not HR, not PR, the CEO himself. He apologized for the unfortunate misunderstanding, praised my commitment to integrity, and offered to reinstate me with a raise, a new title, and an apology letter for the record. I told him no. Because here's the thing, I didn't want my old job back. I didn't want to rebuild the place that tried to destroy me. I didn't want to sit at the same desk where Grant humiliated me to an audience. I had already accepted an offer at a company that didn't treat employees like chess pieces, and they hired me because when they looked into my background, the investigator told them, if you want someone who catches what others miss, this is your guy. Grant tried to ruin me using the badge system. But he never understood the irony. I designed the badge system. And it recorded every move he made. Corporate checkmate. I kept my face blank as Mark's eyes darted to mine, wide, confused, almost pleading, as if I owed him some kind of mercy. But mercy wasn't in my job description anymore. Not after the way they'd handled my firing. The VP of operations stormed in next, her heels snapping against the tile like the countdown clock on a bomb. What is going on? Security called me in. She froze when she saw the monitors. Her voice dropped to a whisper edged with steel. Oh, Mark. You didn't. But he had. And thanks to the badge logs, camera sync, and the automated admin notifications that triggered with his override attempts, the system had documented it all, down to the second. She exhaled sharply. You tried to force unauthorized access to a restricted database, and you used a terminated employee's credentials to do it. Mark swallowed hard. His throat clicked loud enough that I heard it. It wasn't like that. I was just covering your tracks, she said. His silence was answer enough. The VP turned to me. Thank you for staying to hand everything off professionally. You're free to go. IT will finish the investigation. Translation: they needed me out so they could tear Mark apart without an audience. I nodded once, gave Mark a final, measured look, then headed to the elevator. As the doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of him, standing small, cornered, and suddenly aware of the monster he'd made of himself. By the time I reached the lobby, my phone buzzed with an email from the VP. Subject: thank you. Body: we owe you a great deal. We'll be in touch. I didn't know if that meant a consulting contract, a settlement, or simply an apology wrapped in corporate PR language. And honestly, it didn't matter. Because the truth was simple, they fired me thinking I was powerless. But the badge they tried to revoke, the system they thought I'd just walk away from, kept the receipts. And when the walls closed in, every log, every timestamp, every digital footprint pointed straight at the real culprit. I stepped out into the sunlight, lighter than I'd felt in years. Corporate chess isn't about power. It's about knowing which pieces can move, even after you've left the board. I didn't make it halfway across the parking lot before I saw someone jogging after me, Tara from IT. She was out of breath, waving a folder like it weighed 100 pounds. Hey, wait, she called. I paused, surprised. She reached me and held out the folder. I figured you might want this. It's a copy of the investigation report. Internal only. Your badge logs, they pretty much dismantled Mark's entire narrative. I blinked. Already? She gave a grim little laugh. He triggered so many alerts trying to access the restricted DB that the system auto-generated a full audit. It connected everything: your termination, his supervisor override attempts, the missing project files, even the deleted testing environment. So he really tried to pin all of that on me, I said quietly. Oh, he didn't just try, Tara said. He built a whole timeline. The moment they canned you, he said you sabotaged the new financial integration and wiped entire datasets out of spite. She shook her head. But the badge log showed you weren't even in the building when half of it happened. I felt a slow, cold satisfaction settle into place. I'm guessing that's when he started making things worse by panicking. Her eyebrows shot up. He tried every trick. Credential cloning. Time of access spoofing. Even attempted to run a clearance escalation script. She lowered her voice, which would have been bad enough. But he ran the script off his own workstation. I couldn't help it. I let out a short laugh. That idiot. Her expression softened. You didn't deserve any of this, you know. I nodded, accepting the truth of that in a way I hadn't before. What happens now? Well, she glanced back toward the building. HR is scrambling. Legal's involved. And the VP? She's furious. I'd say Mark's days are numbered. Ours, really. I let the silence sit a moment, the kind that felt less like an ending and more like a door unlocking. You did the right thing walking away, Tara added quietly. But it's nice when the universe lets someone see the truth. I took the folder, tucked it under my arm, and gave her a genuine smile. Thanks. For this. And for not assuming the worst. She shrugged. People lie. Data doesn't. With that, she headed back toward the glass doors, and I made my way to my car. I slid into the driver's seat, closed the door, and opened the report. Page after page spelled out a story I already knew, but this time, in black and white, undeniable, I wasn't the villain. I was the audit trail. And Mark? He finally learned the one lesson corporate life never lets you escape. If you're going to fire someone unfairly, make damn sure the system isn't watching. But mine was. Every second. Every swipe. Every login. And in the end, it wasn't revenge that got him, it was the truth he thought he could rewrite. I was halfway through the report when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally I'd ignore it, but something told me this call wasn't spam. I answered. Hello? A clipped, controlled voice replied, "This is Lisa Hendricks, VP of Operations. Do you have a moment?" Ah. So the avalanche had already begun. Sure, I said, keeping my tone neutral. I'm calling regarding the situation that occurred earlier today. Her voice strained on the word situation, like she was trying very hard not to curse. I've reviewed preliminary findings from the systems audit. Your access badge provided crucial data points that contradict the statements made by Mark Stevenson. I leaned back in the seat. I see. I want to be clear, she continued. Your termination should not have happened. At all. And had I been informed of the circumstances earlier, I would have intervened. That was interesting. Higher-ups never admitted fault unless they were already scrambling to cover their own exposure. I appreciate the clarification, I said, though I didn't bother to pretend I believed it. We would like to invite you back in, she said quickly. Not just to discuss reinstatement, but also to review the findings with legal. There is significant concern that Mark's actions, if left unaddressed, could create risk for the entire company. I let her words float in the silence. She waited, expecting gratitude or eagerness or a quick yes. But I didn't owe them any of that. I'll think about it, I said. There was a pause, surprised, tense. Of course. But we would appreciate a response sooner rather than later. We ended the call, and I sat there staring at my reflection in the dark screen of my phone. The same company that had marched me out like a criminal was now scrambling for my cooperation. And the irony? They still didn't understand what they were asking. Reinstatement. Review. Internal meetings. They wanted me to come back inside, to clean up their mess. But they hadn't thought about what it felt like to be fired without warning. To be humiliated in front of coworkers. To be watched as if I were a threat. To have security escort me out while people pretended not to stare. They hadn't thought about the damage. But the badge logs had. They remembered everything. And suddenly, in that moment of quiet clarity, I realized something. I didn't want to go back. Not to help them. Not to save them. Not to patch their holes or fix their fire. If anything, they needed to learn what it felt like when someone they depended on simply walked away. I closed the folder, placed it on the passenger seat, and started the engine. For once, I wasn't driving toward anything. I was driving away, and letting them deal with the consequences of underestimating the one employee who had the receipts. Literally. The next morning, while I was sipping a quiet cup of coffee and enjoying what was supposed to be an unemployed Wednesday, my inbox started exploding. Not with reassurances. Not with apologies. With panic. A dozen messages from former coworkers. 3 from managers who hadn't made eye contact with me in months. And one, long, frantic, and riddled with typos, from HR. Something had happened. I clicked on the first message I recognized, from Jordan in compliance. Dude. Call me. ASAP. The audit report dropped like a bomb. I didn't call him. I opened the file he'd attached instead. It was beautiful. The badge logs had built a perfect timeline, every entrance, every exit, every door, every secured room. My access was clean, consistent, indefensible. Marks? Not so much. The system had automatically flagged half a dozen anomalies where his credentials were used in restricted areas while he was on vacation. Then came the deeper logs, the tampering attempts, the after-hours data pulls, the unauthorized server room visit that he'd blamed on me. Security had cross-checked timestamps with camera footage. None of the footage showed me. But it showed him. Or rather, it showed someone else using his badge and laptop. Someone he clearly didn't expect the company to ever investigate. That alone was bad enough. But the best part? The footage showed that on 3 occasions, he himself had used my workstation while I was out of the office, then pushed the blame onto me for system irregularities. The final page of the report read like poetry: recommendation, immediate suspension of Mark Stevenson pending full investigation. Potential criminal liability due to evidence of falsification, unauthorized data access, and fraud. My coffee tasted better than it had in years. A minute later, my phone rang again. Lisa's number. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes after that, HR called. Ignored. 5 minutes later, legal tried. Declined. I wasn't being petty. I wasn't being dramatic. I was simply letting the company sit in the silence they had created. Then Jordan called. I answered that one. He'd always been decent to me. Man, he said in a half-whisper, they're losing their minds. Mark's been escorted out. Compliance is treating this like a federal crime. Legal is yelling at HR is yelling at operations, and operations is blaming everyone. And they're all trying to reach you. I'm aware, I said. They want you back. Like, yesterday. They're terrified you'll, well, lawyer up. I smiled even though he couldn't see it. Jordan, I said, I was fired. I have no obligation to clean up their mess. Yeah, but you could really hurt them if you wanted to. I don't need to hurt anyone, I said calmly. They did that to themselves. A quiet moment passed. He exhaled slowly. I hope, he said, you know you deserve better than that place. I do, I replied. And I'm finally acting like it. The calls kept coming, each more desperate than the last. Emails piled up, ranging from polite to pleading to borderline panicked. But I didn't answer. Not out of spite. Not out of vengeance. Simply because, for the first time, they needed me more than I needed them. And that was all the revenge I'd ever wanted. By late afternoon, things reached a level of corporate chaos I had never witnessed even during my years inside that building. It was almost comical, my phone vibrating nonstop, my email inbox filling with increasingly frantic subject lines. Urgent, need to speak immediately, request for clarification on badge logs, please contact us. Time sensitive, we are prepared to discuss reinstatement. They really thought the offer of crawling back into the same environment that threw me under the bus would entice me. Not a chance. I sat on my balcony as the sun dipped behind the skyline, a gentle breeze carrying the faint sounds of traffic. It was the most peace I'd felt in months. Meanwhile, the company that had tossed me aside like defective equipment was apparently tearing itself apart. Perfect balance. Then, around 6 p.m., I got an email unlike the others. It was from the company's chief legal officer, a man who never acknowledged my existence even when passing me in the hallway. His email was nearly a full-page letter, formal, polished, and dripping with the kind of politeness lawyers only use when they're terrified. He explained the misunderstanding, expressed deep regret, and stated the company was exploring corrective measures. He insisted on a meeting at your earliest convenience. And he closed with, "Your cooperation in this matter would be invaluable to resolving our ongoing internal investigation." Translation: please save us from the lawsuit we know you could drop on our heads. I leaned back in my chair, enjoying the moment. For years, that company had held all the power. Jobs, evaluations, raises, everything dangled over employees like a leash. But now, they were powerless. I was free. I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I opened a new email draft, not to HR, not to legal, not to my former boss. To myself. It was a list. A simple one, things I want next, a job where competence is valued, managers who don't scapegoat their staff, a team that respects experience, a company with integrity, a workplace where I don't constantly brace for impact, the future I control. Once, I would have clung to my old job out of fear of change, fear of instability, fear of losing everything I'd worked for. But being fired had given me the kind of clarity I never would have found otherwise. The company had made their decision. And now, finally, I was making mine. At 7:13 p.m., I typed out a single message and sent it to the chief legal officer. Just one line: I decline to participate. Please direct all further communication to my attorney. I didn't have an attorney. Not yet. But judging by the immediate silence, no new calls, no emails, those words hit exactly where they needed to. I closed my laptop, finished my drink, and watched the city lights blink on. The company had fired me. But my badge, my logs, and the truth? They had fired back. In the weeks that followed, the company continued to unravel. Word spread quickly through industry circles, first as rumors, then as confirmed fact, that senior leadership had been caught fabricating performance issues, manipulating documentation, and firing employees to cover their own mistakes. Several executives resigned quietly, a few were escorted out less quietly, and HR was gutted from the inside out. Every time another headline popped up on LinkedIn about organizational restructuring or leadership transitions, I couldn't help but smile. I wasn't trying to burn the place down, but I also wasn't going to stand in the way when they lit the match themselves. Meanwhile, I moved on to a new position at a company where transparency wasn't just a buzzword slapped on a banner in the lobby. On my first week, my new manager looked me in the eye and said, "If something goes wrong, we fix it together. No scapegoats." It was such a simple sentence, yet it hit me harder than any apology my old employer could have crafted. For the first time in years, I felt like my work mattered, and more importantly, that I did. Sometimes people think revenge is about retaliation, about getting even. But the real revenge? It's walking away while they're forced to sit in the mess they created, finally exposed by the truth they tried so desperately to bury. I didn't need to destroy them, my badge had already done that. All I had to do was step aside and let the truth finish the job. And as I settled into my new role, surrounded by people who valued competence over politics and integrity over theatrics, I realized something. Being fired was the best thing that ever happened to me. They thought they were cutting me loose. Instead, they freed me.